Hi everyone, Erica of Confident Parenting. We are back on Monday night to continue our Ask Us Anything question and answer series for expecting new and veteran parents. And I hope that some of you are able to join us tonight or to watch us on replay. I know summer evenings are very busy and it can be hard to be joining us in just a moment. And she is Maria Sanders. She has joined us before. She is a parent coach, and we received lots of great questions in advance that we'll be getting to tonight. Hi, Maria. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for making time again. And my apologies. Let me adjust my volume. You were supposed to join us last week, and I messed up. So you're here tonight instead. Thank you for fixing my mistake and for being flexible. Summer pandemic parenting, right?
Totally.
Glad you understood. So while we're waiting for people to join, I was just saying, I know that summer evenings are hard. So lots of parents are probably going to watch this on replay, but I know they're interested because we did get a fair amount of questions in advance. Parenting is a hot topic all the time, but especially after this long stretch where we've all been kind of stuck together under maybe less than ideal, less than typical circumstances. So that's got to be getting to everybody. But let me just remind everybody who you are and what you do. So Maria Sanders is a licensed social worker, a PCI certified parent coach, and you specialize in working with children and families for over 20 years. You're also certified in collaborative problem solving. So you're helping parents, supporting parents to create a sense of calm and confidence. I love that. And connection within themselves and their families. And I think that's really going to fit all the questions that we received tonight. Anything you want anybody to know before we dive into our question?
No, I think that's good. I think, like you said, the pandemic has probably driven a lot of us crazy. And so I always remind parents to offer themselves some compassion. We're all in a tough place, and no matter what, life is challenging here and there. And with this pandemic, it's added an additional layer of stress and often anxiety. And we just got to go easy on ourselves and remind ourselves it's okay. We're all doing the best that we can.
For sure. I love that. Okay, well, let's dive in then. So our first question comes from a mom who asks, how can we help encourage our shy 4-year-old to initiate play with other kids? I know this was really tough for my son when he was little. We worked on it for so long, and now I feel like the pandemic undid a lot of what we did. But my son's much older. So what would you say to a mom of a 4-year-old?
Several things. One is we always, and this is probably my answer for everything, is we want to check in with how we're feeling about the situation, because our brains all have something called mirror neurons, where unconsciously we are mirroring what we're feeling onto our children. So if we're feeling anxious about either a new situation or anxious that our child is feeling a bit shy, that feeling, that vibe is going to get mirrored onto our kids. So we want to make sure that we're feeling that confidence, even if they don't have that confidence and that they're feeling shy, so that we can help create that energy within the situation. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, we all have this idea of who our kids are supposed to be or who we think they're going to be. And sometimes it's difficult. Like, I tend to be a really outgoing person, and one of my kids went through a period where they were a little bit more on the shy side, and that was difficult because here I am, this outgoing social person, and they weren't matching up with kind of who I thought they would be, because I thought, well, if you're like me and you're my kid, then you would not be shy either. But they are sometimes different, right? And so we want to just kind of honor who they are and recognizing their need in the moment. What is it that they need when they're feeling shy? Probably many parents might try to oh, it's okay, you can do it, just say hi. And we're trying to push them and kindly encourage them. When on the flip side, what they might need in the moment is a little bit more comfort and support and even role modeling. So we might want our child to say, "Hi, Joey, it's nice to meet you," or, "Hey, do you think I can play with you?" But they might be feeling too shy. Well, we might have that expectation for our child, and they might not have the skills to do that. So we want to help them build those skills by maybe role modeling what that looks like and giving them a little bit of a voice when they don't have one. And when we're not in the situation, those are perfect opportunities to role play and practice, because it's easy to say, "Hey, Susie, next time we're at the playground and you see someone you don't know that you want to play with, why don't you just go up to them and introduce yourselves?" That would be really easy, but it's not. And so what we really want to do is role play when the stress of the real situation isn't there, so that your child can practice, so they can build that confidence in that language and know how to respond to other people when it's not in the heat of the moment. So I think those might be a couple of good strategies and ideas. And I also mentioned this a whole lot. Books and TV are great learning tools. So maybe you're watching Daniel Tiger or some other like 4-year-old kid-friendly show, and there's a situation of a child that's feeling shy. Oh wow, why don't we pause the show and talk about that? And that way the child doesn't feel like the spotlight is on them, and they could say, "Oh, well, yeah, well, if I was that child, this is what I would say, or this is what I would do." And we can practice that way too. So it kind of just makes it a little bit more playful, and again, takes the spotlight off the child.
That's great. I love that. And I can vouch for when that was a struggle for my son. That was one of the things that we did. Well, a couple of the things that we did. Role play was really helpful for him, particularly with school drop off, which is a different topic that we may not touch on tonight, but we would literally pretend to get in the couch, hop in the car, drive to school. What do we do when we get there? Miss Susan's going to come take you by the hand. And it really, I wouldn't say drop off got easy, but it got easier because we had rehearsed it, you're right, during a time that wasn't as scary. And same at the playground. I would just sort of get down and like, "Hey, what are you guys playing? Oh, that's cool. Oh, this is, my son, and he's this old and he likes to play that too." And eventually he did kind of start doing exactly what you saw me do, many times. So that can certainly, every child's different, of course, but that could certainly be helpful. Okay, so I think that's it on that question. You got anything else on that topic?
I think that's good.
Okay, good. So moving on, still with a 4-year-old, how can we help our 4-year-old to stay calm when things don't go her way?
How do we stay calm when things don't go our way?
If you understand the age range.
Even adults have temper tantrums when things don't go our way. So, I mean, poor 4-year-olds, right? It's a tough time. They're learning so much, and emotions are so big, and sometimes they're scary. And so, again, I think it's first recognizing our role in the situation. How can we build a sense of calm? So our child is starting to escalate. They're upset because something's not going their way, and they start to escalate. What are we doing in that situation to help keep the calm? This wonderful person that many of you may know is Dr. Dan Siegel, and he talks a lot about the flipping of the lid, which I talk to all my families about. And I make sure, I wish I had coined this because I think it's fantastic, but basically my fingers here, that's the top part of the brain. That's the part of the brain that's able to think rationally, problem solve, organize, memory, frustration, tolerance, flexibility, all those things. And you've heard the term, "I got so mad I just flipped my lid." Well, the lid of the brain flips, and under here where my thumb is, that's the primitive part of the brain. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. And what happens, and that's the reactive part. So that's often what we see. So I'm guessing when your child doesn't get her way and she's not calm, it's because her lid flipped and she's showing this part of the brain. And so along comes a stressor. And in this situation, it sounds like the stressor is she didn't get her way. She wanted something and she's not getting it. And that's the stress. And it gets underneath the lid in a lot of ways. And sometimes the lid flips, and it makes it difficult for the child to access that thinking part of the brain that says, oh, you know what, maybe I should be calm, or maybe I should problem solve in this situation, or maybe I should think clearly. None of that is happening because their ability to access that thinking part of the brain is impaired. And so we just want to try our best, it's not always easy, to come from a place of curiosity and calm and compassion. Like, I guess those are the 3 C's, right? So we want to come from that place of curiosity where we're saying, I wonder why she's so upset. She's not getting her way. I get that, but why this reaction? And when we can come from that place of curiosity, we're much more likely to move at a slower pace and not be so reactionary to our kids. And maybe just by asking some questions, that may help to bring our child's lid back down to where they're feeling regulated and calm. Once they're feeling regulated and calm, then we can do all those things like problem solve and, think through situations and talk through situations. But when their lid is flipped, there is no way that the thinking is happening because it just went out the window. This thinking part of the brain is out the window. And so, you know what? It really is hard to not get what you want. There are plenty times, like I said, even adults get really frustrated. The thing is, we have the skills oftentimes, I wouldn't say always, but oftentimes we have the skills and the ability to say, you know what? I didn't get what I want. What can I do differently? Sometimes even for adults, that's really, really hard to do. Now, mind you, we're talking about a 4-year-old whose skill development isn't as great as a 40-something-year-old. And so we need to help. We're not going to necessarily be able to do a whole lot in the heat of the moment, because in the heat of the moment, the lid is flipped, but we can get proactive. So what we can do is say, you know what? I've noticed that every time or most times that she doesn't get what she wants, she tends to flip out. She tends to have this big reaction. So I know something's coming up down the pike that she's not going to get what she wants. So let me work with her and partner with her ahead of time to practice going back to that role play. How do we handle situations that we don't get what we want? And so if we can sort of plan out those situations a little bit more in advance, then we can work through them when everybody, both child and parent, are feeling regulated and calm. Because when we're both in that state, then we can work through situations.
I love that. And I think my son was a tad older, but I would even say sometimes out loud when I felt like I was flipping my lid, not related to my son, like, I feel like I'm going to start yelling. What should I do? like sort of let him, so that it's not always, buddy, you should be doing this, buddy, let's try that. It was like, what should mommy do? Because he liked that a lot better. But then I felt like sometimes he would remember that when it was, when it was the situation in reverse. So I agree that could be really, really helpful. Okay, well, hopefully that helps, Mom. And yeah, just to normalize that, even us, we as adults have a hard time when things aren't going our way. Okay, our next question. How can I handle it when my 11 and 8-year-olds come to me to complain about a fight that they are having?
Was someone just listening in on bath time just now?
Into your home?
I have an 8 and 10-year-old and they fight. And what do we do about it? I mean, there's a couple of things. Obviously, the question is, what do we do when they come to us? The other thing is, and I will answer that.
Sometimes labeled as tattling, right? I don't know if we call it that anymore.
Right. And it could, definitely it still could be. But we just want to remember we don't have to react right away. So we hear our kids fighting and we want to exercise that pause where we can stop and listen and hear what's going on. Sometimes we might give them that opportunity where they can work it out themselves. And we just want to think through. If we can slow down and not immediately react and just listen a little bit, it helps us think through, what are my choices here? How can I respond? What's going to be the best approach? If we don't give that time for a pause, the likelihood is we're going to come at our kids having a big reaction and maybe yelling at them or separating them or, putting them in timeout. If we can slow down and say, what could be happening here? And remembering that flipping of the lid. If I'm calm and I go to my kids, I am much more likely to get them back into a calm state than if I'm coming at them, raring and really aggravated. So that's like the beforehand. So now your kids come to you and they're like, Mom, Dad, we're whatever. There was this big fight. So the work I do is called collaborative problem solving. And the whole idea of that and what we want to do is take both concerns. We really want to have both concerns on the table at the same time. So we really want to gather information to understand everybody's perspective and make sure that we're keeping both perspectives on the table, because one voice isn't more important than the other. Both your concerns matter to me. I want to hear from both of you, almost like we're a mediator. Fill me in, help me understand what's going on. And then we're going to use those two concerns to problem solve. And we're not going to find a solution that just works for one person. We're going to find a solution that works for both parties. Again, because one person's voice isn't greater than the other. So we want to make sure we find a solution, and not us. When I say we, I really mean ideally, especially at ages 8 and 11, we might have kids who can help problem solve. And so we want them to...
That's going to be my follow-up question. Can we turn this over at some point?
Yeah, well, that's what we want to do. Again, we're role modeling, right? We're showing them this. Let me help you. Let me give you the tools of how to share your concern. And then let me help you share your concern. And then let's put those two concerns together. And you guys tell me what's a solution that addresses both of those concerns. And when it comes to the children finding the quote unquote answers or the solution to the problem, they're much more likely to follow through with that than if we were to give them, hey, this is what you guys need to do. Mm-hmm. And so helping our kids be able to voice their concerns and generate solutions. Of course, the solutions need to meet both concerns. They need to be doable and realistic, and they also can't create additional concerns. So it's an approach I teach parents. It takes a couple weeks to learn and practice and learn the dialogue. That being said, once we can teach our kids how to work through that collaborative problem solving, it's a fantastic tool, because it is us turning it over to them. It is us saying, you know what? It's not my way or the highway. I'm not, laying down the hammer and saying this is the way it has to go. You guys are going to work together to hear each other's concerns, and together you guys will problem solve. And I know that's easier said than done. There is no way I would expect just off the bat being like, hey guys, you got to do. It takes time. It takes practice. That being said, the repetition of that kind of conversation and that kind of foundation and format is what helps lead to change.
Sure. I think a lot of the challenges we run into as parents, whether we're talking about addressing sleep issues or helping your child initiate play with friends or solving fights among siblings, the hardest thing is that our instinct is to just solve it for our child, but that means that's what's going to happen in every instance down the pike. So we're almost committing to doing it forever and always, right? But we do that because it's in the moment, it's the fastest thing, and it's the go-to thing, the thing that we're used to, the pattern that we have. So what you're suggesting is actually going to be harder in the moment and probably take longer, but it's that investment that over time they maybe will stop coming to you as often or not at all,
right?
And will be able to take it over themselves. But yes, it was good for you to emphasize that it's easier said than done, because it is going to be sort of reversing that in your point of view of like, let me put in this work now so I can put in less work later.
Right. And also, a lot of times our reactions as parents is there's a situation that we feel like is out of control or that we don't have control. And we end up thinking, oh, this is out of control. I've got to control the situation. And when we think we have to control the situation, we often put into place, trying to offer rewards or bribes or punishments or ideas on how to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it really creates a false sense of control, and something that often doesn't help to build any of those problem solving kind of skills. And it also doesn't help to build any relationship, because a lot of times when the adult kind of imposes their will into the situation, it tends to rupture the relationship, because we're often trying to manipulate or motivate our kids to do something that they can't really do. And so it's almost like, I'm a parent coach, and parents then need to be a kids coach in coaching them in, this is how we're going to do it, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to guide you and teach you. Discipline means to teach. So I'm going to teach you, discipline you. I'm going to teach you how to work through this challenging situation.
Right. Awesome. Okay, I love that. I should have mentioned, anybody that's watching, if you have a question and didn't get to submit it in advance, go ahead and pop it in the comments. We'll keep an eye on that section. But to move on, Mom wrote in, my 3-year-old has preferred dad for most of his life. Any insight that you can share on preferred parents? I know this is something I run into a lot when I'm working with families on improving sleep. They have a preferred parent to put them to bed, to respond in the middle of the night. And sometimes it's a true preference. Sometimes it's like a stalling tactic. Now I want the other parent. But it sounds like for this mom, it's a chronic, legit thing for 3 years, which I imagine is a little hard. Any insight you can offer on that?
So I first have to offer, my heart to those parents who feel like they are not the preferred parent, because I know that's really hard. And it feels like you're being put out and something must be wrong with how you're doing things, or, that you may never have this connection with your child. And that's one of the things I actually talk about with parents, is this idea of time zones. And so we really want to try to just stay in the present moment and not focus on the past or focus on the future. Because if we're stuck sort of in the past, what we're thinking is, oh, this is the 5th night she wants her dad, or this is the 5th night she wants her mom, and this has been so difficult the past several nights, and we're really just focusing there. Or if we're thinking about the future, what we're thinking is, oh, I wonder what's going to happen when she's in high school. Are we going to be connected? Are we going to be close? How are we going to get through middle school if she doesn't even trust me? And then we're focused on the future, and we're missing this whole idea of staying in the present moment. So that's one of the things. I would also say, as far as, this preferred parent idea, we want to first understand that toddlers, this is what they do. This is it's very, very common, because they're starting to understand everybody's role in their lives and understanding who sort of does what, and that they have some autonomy in decision making, which is why, and you probably see this a lot with potty training, like, oh, I can decide no. I can decide I don't want to put my shoes down. I can decide I want dad to put me to bed, or I want mom to put me to bed. And so at this age, at 3 years old, it was at
3 years old.
Yeah. At this age, they're like, ooh, I get to say yes and I get to say no, and things happen when I make these kinds of decisions.
And they know a lot better.
What'd you say?
And they no a lot better than yes.
Exactly. And so that's a healthy thing, and that's a really important thing developmentally that kids can and should go through. So that's also something that just to keep in mind, that I know it doesn't feel good. It is typical and it is partly expected. And then what do we do about it? So in the moment, what do we do? So what we need to keep in mind is we want to show, I don't want to call it equality, but the other parent, the preferred, quote unquote, preferred parent, can do a really great job in not pushing like, oh no, it's your mom's turn. It's not my turn. Go with mommy. It's mommy's turn. I'm going to go do something else. But more in sharing. I mentioned role modeling for the past couple questions, role modeling comes back into play. So let's say it's tea party time and you and your 3-year-old are doing a tea party, and your 3-year-old says, no, 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 I don't want mommy here. I don't want mommy to play tea party. Or I just want to play with you, daddy. Well, you can model and say, oh, let's invite mommy to tea party. Mommy, I would love for you to have some of my tea. Mommy, can you help me? And so incorporating the other parent into the process. What we're trying to do is role model what we would like to see. And so we don't necessarily want to, oops, my thing. I'm sorry. We don't necessarily want to give in, and we don't want to push an agenda that is going to escalate our child either. And so if we're able to work more like what I was saying, role modeling and showing our child what it looks like to incorporate, then they're not feeling like they're being pushed to do a certain thing or to invite that parent that I feel like really bad saying the non-preferred parent, but you know,
well,
there should be another name. But I think that's going to be really helpful in just making sure that the one parent is inviting in and, role modeling what it looks like to invite that parent into the process.
Yeah, that's great. And I would wonder too if that mirror neuron thing would factor back in, not to put any of this on mom at all, because like you said, it's hard, but I know if it were me, I would start to anticipate that that's how my child's going to react or what they're going to say. And probably my face and my body language would start to show that I'm like anticipating it and tensing up and feeling whatever feelings I'm going to feel. So maybe to just being mindful of, as mindful as possible of that, which is easier said than done.
Absolutely.
It's really hard.
And it's true. I'm glad that you mentioned that anticipation, because sometimes we might say, oh, I'm anticipating that I'm going to get pushed away for bath time, so I'm just going to go in the other room.
Right.
And then it's almost like perpetuating this. We don't want to teach the child like, oh, you don't have any control and I'm going to stay here no matter what, even if you don't want me here. And that's why, again, I think it's part of it is the role of that preferred parent to say, we're sharing in these duties. And yes, I can still help you, maybe wash your hair, and maybe mommy can do this. And if the child keeps saying no, the other parent often would want to retreat, because like, why would you want to stay there if you're constantly being pushed away?
Sure.
And so demonstrating that collaborativeness, I love that word, working together and saying, here we are doing this together, and that shared duty and shared experience, I think, can be really helpful for the child.
Sure. And having both of us having older kids, so yours are, I think you said 10 and 8, mine's 11. I can't say absolutely, but I feel pretty confident that this is probably going to flip for this parent at some point, because they do go, this is a long phase, obviously, for 3 years, but it could still shift, and maybe mom will get such a long turn that she'll be like, oh my gosh, remember those days when you didn't even want me? Because sometimes they're all about you. So nothing is forever, and that's, again, easier said than done, but the further out you get, the more you see that over and over and over again. So just knowing that might be a helpful insight as well. Even the things that last a long time may not be, forever. And mom said, thank you. That was helpful in the comments.
Oh, good.
Thank you for that. Okay, good. Can you touch on, hopefully there's no little ears in my house, but I actually have my own question that I'd love for you to touch on for anyone that has older kids heading into the tween years, on lying. I know it's developmentally appropriate, but I'd love to hear what you say about it with all your information. It's nothing, it's like inconsequential stuff where I'm like, why would you even, that wasn't even necessary, right? But can you touch on like why that happens so often as they get older?
So there's a couple different reasons. Sometimes, and I think oftentimes it's out of fear. So it's scary to tell the truth. That's a really hard thing to do. And so recognizing that is it comes from a place of fear and protecting themselves. So we just want to check in and make sure that we're providing a space where our child does feel safe to say, you know what, I made a mistake, and I know, Mom, you're not going to yell at me, or I'm not going to get punished for it, which is why I love the collaborative problem solving, because what it is, there needs to be a foundation of trust where the child does feel safe sharing their concern and sharing what's going on. So using that CPS approach, what I would want to do is say, hey, buddy, I noticed the other day, I don't know if you have an exact situation of a recent lie that you could share.
So many. I can't think of an exact one quickly. Sometimes it'll be a story. It'll be like, hey, guess what happened? And as it goes on, I start to get skeptical, and I can kind of tell like it wasn't true. And I'll be like, but why did you even make that up in the first place? So it might sometimes be for entertainment value. Sometimes I do think it's what you're saying, though, of like being afraid of my reaction to the truth, my overreaction to the truth.
So again, coming from that place of curiosity, of saying, like you just said, I wonder why he's creating this story. Right. When we can come from that place of curiosity, we're just keeping everything more open. And so really just not only being curious ourselves, but asking our child. So I noticed you were sharing a story with me the other day. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and where that was coming from? And it seems like it might have been a little bit, made up or fantasy, or what parts of that story were true and what parts do you think you might have created? And why is it sometimes difficult for you to share the truth or share the true story? We don't want to necessarily blame them or accuse them of lying, because when we do that, it's often triggering. And if it's triggering, they're often flipping their lid, and then there's a bigger reaction that we then have to deal with. But if we're able to ask some questions and say, buddy, you're not in trouble. I'm not mad at you. I really am just curious. And basically what we want to communicate is it's safe here. Mm-hmm. If you make a mistake, I do want you to come to me because I want to work with you through that mistake. And so that takes some time, but it also takes time because the trust needs to be built. And so we need to work on our reaction, that we're not upset or punishing that kind of behavior, and instead really being curious and saying, what was going on? By no means are you in trouble. I just want to understand so that I can help you. And so that we together can make sure that this is a safe place for you to share what really happened, on the playground or whatever.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. We will probably wrap up soon. We have something tonight. So if anybody wanted to ask a question and didn't get to, go ahead and post it in the comments. But can you, we're through the questions that were submitted in advance, even mine. Thank you for that. But I know that families ask me very often about punishment, which you just mentioned, and specifically timeouts, why they don't work for their child, why they backfire, should they even be using them at all? If they're not using them, what should they do instead? So in the minutes we have left, if you can touch on that, I know it's probably something a lot of families are wondering about. So we'll go back to the younger ones now. Timeout wouldn't work.
I was, as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, am I going to address this with like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old mindset or a 10 or 11-year-old mindset? And as I was thinking through, okay, how am I going to answer your question? I was thinking it kind of is the same. Right. So, all right. The word discipline, actually, it means to teach. So we just want to keep that in mind, because parents will always reach out to me and be like, Maria, I need help with disciplining my child. And I ask them, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, and they get into talking about punishments. And we want to remember that discipline means to teach. So these are our opportunities to teach our kids the skills and the things they need for the quote unquote real world. And sometimes parents will say, well, they need to be able to live in the real world, and there are punishments and there are consequences in the real world. And that is absolutely true. So therefore, we want to set them up for success. We want to help teach them the skills that they need here at home so that they can then handle whatever, is out there. So with regards to timeouts often aren't teaching the skills that the child needs. I talk a lot about neurocognitive thinking skills in the areas of flexibility, frustration tolerance, and problem solving. And in order to teach skills, we have to work and partner and do that collaborative problem solving that I talked about. Whereas punishment often creates a wedge and often has the child feeling bad. Yes, I know some parents will be like, well, I want him to feel bad about what he did, and I get that. But what we want to do is teach them not to be afraid of a consequence necessarily, but how to just do things differently or do things better, right? So yeah, I want my one daughter to learn that you can't hit your sister, but because you're going to get in trouble. But really what I want her to do is learn how to communicate when she's feeling frustrated, right? Because if she could communicate when she's feeling frustrated, she's less likely to hit. So that's one of the pieces. And timeouts, the child often feels left unheard and unseen and alone. And timeouts are often the reaction or response to some big event. And sometimes those big events and those big emotions are really scary, especially for the young kids, where they have these emotions and sometimes they don't even know why they did what they did. And parents will say, I asked him why he did that. And he's like, I don't know. And the truth is, they don't know. Because sometimes these emotions hijack the child and there's a reaction that they're sometimes not even in control of. Because the likelihood is if they could do better, they would do better. And so there's something going on that's getting in their way. And again, we've got to work to partner with them to teach the skills. And so I'm not really a fan of timeouts. I am a fan of quieting down together. Remember, in the beginning,
instead, I've heard that.
What'd you say?
I've heard those referred to as time-ins instead.
Right, exactly. And so what we want to do, we talked earlier in the beginning about those mirror neurons. If we're feeling calm and regulated, and our child is having some emotional outburst, we want to be that flagpole for them in that storm. We're the flagpole and they're that flag waving in the storm. That's fine. Flap all you want. I'm here and I've got your back. No matter what, in your darkest hour, I am here for you. And I'm going to be by your side and I'm going to work with you and teach you so that we can get through this together. Otherwise, the child is left with these feelings saying, what do I do about these horrible, weird, ugly feelings that I've been pushed away from my parent and I don't know even what to do with them? Instead, we can say, we're going to work together. I see you're upset and I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you manage these feelings. We're not going to make them disappear. We can't push them under a rug. Feelings come and they go, just like a wave. They come up and then they go down. We get really excited and then we're back to equilibrium. We get really angry and then we come back down. They all come and go. And so it's not about saying we don't want to feel these feelings. It's how do we manage these feelings? How do we deal with them? And again, that goes back to discipline being a form of teaching.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that quote. I think I shared it recently of children do well when they can. So it's easy to start thinking of your kids as giving you a hard time and, not to say that they never are giving you a hard time on purpose, but if we change our mindset to, instead of saying, why are they giving me such a hard time, being curious, like you said, wow, they're really having a hard time. So what's going on? How can I help them with that? It just makes us come at it, I think, from a different angle. Again, one of those things that's easier said than done, of course. All right, great. Do you have time to touch on one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that my sleep families really, really struggle with very often, us parents, I should say, is just setting boundaries and holding boundaries. So in this spectrum of your collaborative parenting and all of that, let's use as an example a child who just refuses to stay. They're in a big kid bed. They refuse to stay put. They come out 752 times at bedtime, and eventually the parent, just gives up and lays with them or sits next to them, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's often something we don't want to have to do over and over. And they end up running the show, basically, right? Like they're running the house. The parents have no upper hand. They're afraid to, use punishment, but in lieu of that, they just don't really know how to firmly set and hold the boundaries. And then that starts to trickle to a lot of other places. Well, I want 10 books instead of 3 books, and I want to go to the bathroom 7 times instead of 1 or 2 times. So any quick tips on, making a parent comfortable with setting boundaries? I think that's just the hardest part, is even feeling that it's okay to do. And then how to do that, factoring in everything that you've mentioned.
Okay, so first, I'm nervous to answer this question because you're our sleep consultant. I feel like I might say something.
Sleep earlier.
That being said, I'll do my best. So going back to this collaborative problem solving idea, even with kids as young as 3.5, there was a family today I talked to. They have a 3.5-year-old, and I explained to them, like, look, a lot of this CPS kind of stuff is much more suited for families with kids over the age of 6. That being said, it is a mindset shift where we are shifting our thinking from it's not about will, it's really about skill. And so we can still take a lot of the philosophy and apply it to our young kids. And so it comes time for sleep. That's something that happens every day. And so we kind of want to start looking for things that we can get proactive about, things that are predictable. Sleep is predictable. I know if I've had to go into my kid's room and help them get back to sleep on Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, the likelihood is I'm going to have to do that again on Wednesday. So why wait until Wednesday night in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. to try to figure out this plan of action? And so we want to try to get ahead of it and be proactive and come up with a plan with our child. That being said, we do want to have our own boundaries. This isn't about the child getting their way and saying, okay, mom, this is how I want it to roll out tonight. It's about us thinking about what's important for us as the parent and understanding our child also has some needs and some concerns, but we want to be clear with what we feel like we can do. Because anytime we start to say yes to something that we should have said no to, that creates friction. And boundaries are in place, and sometimes people think boundaries are bad or not good. Boundaries are like, if you picture yourself on a roller coaster and, one of those upside down roller coasters or whatever, the bars come and they create a boundary around you to protect you, to keep you safe. And what do you do as soon as that bar comes down? You shake it. And you're like, let me make sure this thing is working. And so sometimes kids shake it a little bit to see like, okay, what's going on? And the more clear we are on what our boundaries are, and we feel confident, it's okay if our kids shake it up a little bit. We still want to provide that boundary and or expectation. It's when the expectation isn't met that we then decide, okay, what are we going to do here? And so that's where we go back to being proactive and saying, you know what? I'm not going to wait until Wednesday night at 2 a.m. I'm going to talk to my child when they get home from camp at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and say, hey, buddy, I've noticed you've had a difficult time in the middle of the night with sleep. Can you tell me what's going on? And we want to understand their perspective and where they're coming from. And we want to gather as much information as we can to understand what's difficult for them about this situation. And then we want to share what's important to us. And that might be that I also get enough sleep so that I can feel healthy and strong in the morning, right? And then let's work together to find a solution. And it might be, okay, mom will come in, and whatever it is, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer because every family is different. So, if you're cool with getting up in the middle of the night and tucking your child back in, by all means, there's nothing wrong with that. So just whatever it is you choose, you just want to feel really, like I said, good and clear and confident about your decision. So being clear on what you can bring to the table in that problem-solving solution, and also understanding your child and having them come up with some ideas of how the middle of the night is going to go isn't saying they're going to get it their way. It's just honoring where they are and having them be part of that solution. Because the more involved they are in that, the more likely they are to follow through with that. And so we are going to definitely keep some boundaries. It's not like, oh, read to me 5 books. that might not meet my concern. If my concern is that I get a good night's sleep, reading you 5 books at 2 a.m. isn't going to meet my concern. So we got to make sure that whatever the solution is that we, parent and child, come up with, are solutions that meet both concerns. So it still needs to meet my boundaries or concern, as well as my child's concern. And we can do that together and work through it.
I love that roller coaster analogy, and I will definitely be stealing that from you, and I will try to credit you whenever I remember. That is fantastic. It's the best. I mean, I'm familiar with the explanation, but I haven't heard of, we were just on roller coasters recently, so I was like, oh, that's really, really good.
Yep.
Because at the end of the ride, my husband was like, I didn't think the thing was on right, and I was terrified. And
when we think it's not on right, that's really scary. And so that's a great thing you just mentioned. If one night we're like all lovey-dovey and tucking our kids back and getting them more water and fixing their blanket, and then the next night we're like, nope, I'm not coming in your room. Well, that's giving mixed messages. And that's really scary because you're like, I don't know if this boundary is on right.
Right.
But that was a great thing you mentioned.
That's really excellent. And just for parents to know that it's so normal, especially I always say at 3 and 4, it's almost your child's job to test the boundaries because of that autonomy that you mentioned before. They're just realizing they can say, I don't have to do that, or I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. So we don't have to be scared when they do that. It doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong or anything's wrong with our child. It's almost like, check, they're right where they should be. But then that also means you're right. We have to decide, what are the boundaries? What am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? And I always tell parents, don't just focus on what your child can't do at bedtime or in the middle of the night or when they're playing with their sibling. Focus more on the can do's. You know, you can't come in and wake me up because that makes me a really grumpy mommy and I can't play the way I want to the next day. But, you know, what could you do when you wake up in the middle of the night? Maybe you're giving them a flashlight, or you're talking about, you know, filling up a dream box with ideas that they can dream about, and we're using sleep as an example, but it really could be anything. It's just so much more helpful to say, like, you could do this, this, or this, and not focus on the don't, no.
Yeah.
Because nobody likes to hear that, right?
That's a great point. And also just making sure that we're clear with our expectations again, because sometimes we think our kids should know what's expected, and they don't really. And so whatever plan you come up with, if it's that box you just mentioned or a flashlight or whatever the case may be, there might need to be a couple revisits of checking in and making sure the child understands what's expected. So we're not going to wait until 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe at 6 o'clock over dinner, we're reviewing the plan. So what's expected tonight? What's expected in the middle of the night? And making sure the child understands, because if they're not clear, then again, it's like, it feels wishy-washy. So we just want to make sure that those expectations are really clearly laid out and that they are developmentally appropriate.
And it helps us avoid that knee-jerk reaction, whether it's a 3 a.m. knee-jerk reaction or a, you know, my 2 children just came to me in the middle of a fight reaction. If we already know in our head what we will and won't do in that scenario, we can jump into that instead of jumping into that. Just, you know, you're right, being proactive is a lot better. Well, that's awesome. Your insights were super helpful. I do want to wrap up for our audience sake and for your sake. I know you had something next. Just any last thoughts? Remind everybody where they can find you if they need support with these types of things one-on-one. Obviously, that's the bulk of what you do. So how would somebody reach out for that?
So my website is www.mariasandersparentcoach.com. And on my website, you'll see a link where you can schedule a 20-minute free consultation call. That way you can tell me a bit about your family, ask me a bit about the parent coaching, and we can see if this is a good fit. I haven't done a lot of workshops, but I expect that in the fall I'll be picking up on those. So there's also a newsletter you could get that will keep you up to date on those things. And I do my best with Instagram. I don't feel like I'm awesome at posting, but again, I do what I can. I do the best that I can, and try to keep people connected in that way too.
Great. Yes, and everyone should follow you. One thing we probably should have touched on that totally slipped my mind is stress of back to school, right? So make sure you follow Maria. I know you have a helpful post coming up about it, and Confident Parenting Village as well. We're going to share some tips for easing the stress of back to school. Maybe we'll do a future one on that when it gets just a bit closer. But go follow Maria in all the places. On Instagram, you are at Maria Sanders Parent Coach, and Facebook too, correct?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions in the box. You are welcome. Whoever just said thank you. This was super, super helpful. And my apologies again for mixing up the dates, but I'm so glad this worked out. Thanks for sharing your limited summer time with us. And I'm sure we'll have you back again soon to answer more questions. Thanks for everybody who joined. And we will be back next week to talk about baby massage. So if you are expecting or have a baby and want to know more about the benefits and how to do it, be sure to pop back for that. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Bye.